All right, unexpected appearance. I am making a cameo, okay? I had no plans of really being up here, but Diddy's getting sentenced and trying to hold on. Oh, now I can see. How do I get out of here? See, I've not been on here for a long time and now I've forgotten. I've forgotten how this whole thing works. Hold on, let me share my screen. I started
Uh,
to work a little
what does
bit,
that
but
mean? What does that
How
mean?
much
Is he
case
changed?
law can
I've been trying to keep up with today's proceedings. I tuned in kind of late and they did not really get anywhere. I started out with Core TV and Core TV, I don't know, they're just covering a bunch of other different cases. And then I switched over to Law and Crime and he's still not sentenced. So, yeah, it's a long day for everybody out there.
Is he changing
does
his
it change?
sentence?
Oh man, 5 minutes is that perfect amount of time to show that you're taking it seriously, but not yet quite enough time to really
Okay, what is
change
he
the
saying?
words that you were planning on saying. I don't think that he's going to change what he intended to say when he first started today's session. I think he obviously wants to give everybody a break. He wants the optics of showing that he is taking everything in that came out today. But it doesn't feel to me like 5 minutes is enough to really change what he was planning on saying, in my
What's
opinion.
5 minutes?
Is that because, and if you agree, Joe, is that because
What did they say?
what Sean Combs said was very similar to what he wrote in the letter? It doesn't change the narrative in any way. It may be different.
MC said being a freak is not a crime, okay? People has spoken.
To hear it directly from Sean Combs himself. There were potential variations, taking full
They said Brother
responsibility
Love
for the
is
Mann
coming
Act
back
convictions.
soon.
But if you agree with Serena, is that because it's really not substantively on a whole different from what the judge already read in that letter?
Yeah, and that I think he's going to be more inclined to be moved by the letters of others and the sentencing guidelines and the things that are already in place. Anyway, the question is how much he moves off the dime from that. Again, he should consider what was said today. I think I said that earlier, but he probably had an idea what he was going to do.
All right, somebody said Diddy's getting time served. He's suffered enough, apparently.
P. Diddy, him, and he himself, maybe he was
A few
tipping
people are saying
toward,
time
the
served.
judge was tipping toward doing whatever he was going to do. And there's a question as to whether he could move it a tick one way or the other by saying what he would say. But I think he had a good idea where he was going to be. And I think that considering what other folks would have to say would probably be equally important and maybe even more so.
I believe it's fine, just said. The judge will ask you what you think, Jesse Weber. I don't think so. I don't think the judge is interested in what I have to say. What are we predicting in terms of a sentence here now that we are only potentially a few minutes away? We've been covering it all day. Sierra, we've been covering it for months now. I'll start with you. What are you anticipating for a sentence for Sean Diddy Combs after he was convicted of these two?
What did they have to say?
I think that
Cannot hear
per
you.
what Serena says, Judge Arun Subramanian came into this with a thought in his mind of what he wanted the sentence to be. He's going to consider it for his next 5 minutes. But if you're asking me, my prediction is still that 5 to 7 year range. I don't think that he's going to go on the lower end, what the defense wants, that 14-month sentence. I don't think it's going to be quite as long as what the prosecution is hoping for with the 11 years, which is a significant amount of time. But 5 to 7 years to me is still pretty significant. I mean, if we're talking about his young daughter, Love, she's, a toddler at this point. Add 5 years and she's nearly headed into later elementary school. That's a huge chunk of a child's life. And so I do think the 5 to 7 year range, I'm maybe going to guess 5 years if that's my guess.
Okay.
Serena, I'll ask you what you think in terms of a sentence, and also what can we expect from Judge Arun Subramanian? Is he going to be making a significant long statement as well?
So I agree with Sierra. I'm looking single digit
He has
sentence
to put
here.
his
I think the judge is going to
reasoning
probably just meet in the middle between, the lower end of the
on the
sentence and the
record.
11 years that the prosecution is asking for. So I would be comfortable saying probably 5, 6 years is around where I think this will land. And like Sierra mentioned, the charges that he was actually convicted of are serious, but in the grand scheme of things, with respect to the RICO charge that he could have been facing, are far less severe than what he would have been facing. So I do think there's going to be a significant cut on the sentence. And the judge is going to give a statement, probably not an extraordinarily long statement, but a statement explaining his rationale, a statement that says, I've heard from both sides. I credit such and such from this side of the bench. I credit such and such from this side of the bench. I don't find these particular arguments persuasive. He's going to break it down a little bit, and he's going to give his rationale and then probably end with the actual sentence amount.
You tell me, Joe, is there a possibility he could really significantly downgrade this to 14 months, 16 months, 18 months? Why? Because he said earlier, after hearing the children, it was important to hear them. It was important to hear them. He just heard Sean Combs. His defense attorneys, almost all of them spoke. I believe almost all of them spoke. I don't know if that changed his consensus about this. You heard Sean Combs talk about the vile conditions he was in for over a year. Is that matter? Does that not? He wasn't convicted of the more serious charges, which, by the way, when you talk about Mann Act convictions and when they can reach the higher end of the scale, it's when they're usually coupled with a sex trafficking operation or a racketeering operation. There was violence a part of this. There were aggravating conditions a part of this. But are we looking at it the wrong way? Could the judge come back and shock us all and say 14 months, 18 months, Joe?
It's possible, but I don't think it's probable because, among other things, if he really deviates a long way down, I think he's going to have some explaining to do.
Right.
And so he's going to explain himself anyway, right? But I don't know that people jump up and down and say, there's some people that really love Diddy, that he comes in too high. Oh my God, he gave him 8, 9, 10 years. The sky is falling. There might be a few people. I think there will be more people that may say that this was a slap in the face of the people that were the victims in this case, et cetera, if he really deviates down a great deal. So I think where we end up arriving is still somewhere in the sentencing guidelines. I think we stay there. Now, it's possible. I don't think we're looking at it the wrong way, Jesse, but it's possible that despite how we're looking at it, judge being the judge can say that for some reason, this is an unusual circumstance. I think he's gone through enough. I'm compelled by him saying X, Y, Z. He was not convicted of those other crimes. I'm looking at it in light of the crimes that he was actually convicted of, et cetera, and arrive there. I don't think it happens that way.
Him saying, I want you to make an example of what a person can do if they get another chance. To me, that felt like a powerful statement, particularly, again, you go to this idea of the work that he's been doing inside and...
I don't... Okay. So as far as, I suppose this is what the judge was saying, if I'm quoting or if I'm understanding Jesse correctly, about Diddy being an example of what a person can do when they're given a second chance. I don't know that that is a fair statement in light of criminal defendants that don't have the same resources. That's kind of where I take issue with that statement.
At his word, he genuinely feels remorseful, wants to lead a different life, has the opportunity, the resources, the prestige, where people will listen and maybe they can change their lives. In that sense, if we take it all as true, there is a benefit there, but it doesn't negate what he did. It doesn't negate what he was convicted of. It doesn't negate that there are victims in this case. It's not a victimless crime. Sierra, we have this comment from It's Me, Trish. He wasn't worried about his child or his children when he did all of this. Why should the judge worry about the child?
That's a hard one, because if we're talking about children, they're innocent in all of this. I mean, none of us really picked our parents. I'm sure Diddy's children, they didn't pick him as a dad. They just kind of were born, and that's what it was. And so the kids are innocent if you're thinking about it in that way. They didn't choose their dad. They didn't choose that he would be caught up in all of this and go into the conviction. So if we're looking on that hand and that sort of thing, yeah, it is valuable to consider that these kids would be raised without their father, and that's tricky. However, to the point of whatever our viewer was who wrote in this question, was P. Diddy thinking about his kids when he violated the Mann Act, when he did this crime that he's now been convicted of? If he really was a great dad, we're showing the video here of him being, a caring father who's a family man. But was he thinking about his children when he was going through and all of the allegations that we heard at trial a lot?
So sorry to interrupt. I want to let you know, Judge Subramanian is back. He has begun officially delivering his sentence.
Ooh, okay.
He says to the court, he says to Sean Combs, at the outset, I want you to understand, Mr. Combs, you are not being sentenced for acquitted conduct. So he's not being sentenced for racketeering. He's not being sentenced for sex trafficking. But under 3553, which, by the way, is the federal statute regarding imposition of a sentence, under 3553, I must consider many things. Mr. Combs, you are a self-made artist who has inspired community of color. Okay, so we're stopping right there. We're waiting for these updates.
No, can you just read, please?
Serena, does that I'm going to tell you, there's a but, right? Yes, you've done many things, but, and that might not be good for Sean Combs.
Come on.
When a judge gives any sort of remarks like that, there's always a but. And when you start hearing good things, be prepared for the flip side, because it's coming. And I will say, to your earlier comments about turning life around, this is a very different type of crime than your typical one-day event. Yes, he was a great guy in certain other aspects of his life, perhaps, but he was living a lifestyle of these crimes. It's very different from a defendant who appears in front of a judge who had one bad day, right? Got robbed one person, got into a fight with one person and stabbed that person. This was a lifestyle.
Okay, another update. Judge says, we saw the video. The free game course in the MDC, the court hopes you continue to expand it. You are devoted to your family. The court, of course, considers the collateral consequences.
So invested.
The court has to consider all of your history here. And when that's true, by the way, the factors to be considered in imposing a sentence are I'm looking at the statute, the nature and circumstances of the offense, the history and characteristics of the defendant, the need for the sentence to be imposed, the kinds of sentences available, the kind of sentence and the sentencing range, any pertinent policy statement, the need to avoid unwarranted sentence disparities among defendants. So just looking for an update here. Okay. A history of good works can't wash away the record in this case. You abused these women. You used that abuse to get your way. Freak-offs and hotel nights. The evidence of the abuse is massive. I was sitting right here during the testimony. Joe, this isn't good for Sean Combs.
Just read, please.
No, it's not good for Sean Combs, because he started off with good stuff and he says, but on the other hand,
you please
know what I mean? Because to my mind, it could be different, but a lot of times you start off.
What's up, Allie girl? I've been MIA, but I had to jump on here.
With the part, not with the part that you're going to end with. You know what I mean? Here's the good news, but
here's
the bad news, and here we are because of the bad news, as opposed to here's the bad news, and here's the good news, and here's where we are because of the good news. I think the order of things may dictate that, he's going to come at him, and it's not going to be a low-end type sentence.
Sierra, this is very consistent with what we talked about before, where that video was being played of Sean Combs, where you look at his history of helping others, you look at his works in the community. You and I had talked about it. The argument would be, yes, but at the same time, he was committing crimes. Or after his apology video for Cassie, he was accused of committing crimes. It seems that the judge is being consistent with this. And I apologize if I have to cut you off if the judge says something, but your thoughts?
No, please do cut me off, because I want the updates as much as you do, Jesse, and so do our viewers. But I think it's confusing here, right? But two things can be true. P. Diddy can have all the love in the world for his children, and he can be a great dad to them. But on the other side of the coin, he did commit these acts, and it is violence. And I think the thing that was most telling to me from what we've heard. All right, let's hear that update, Jesse.
Sierra, I'm going to throw it right back to you, but this is the judge. This was subjugation. That is the reality of what happened. These offenses irreparably harmed 2 women. You plied them with drugs. Why did it happen so long? You had the power and resources to keep it going. You were more than a John. Again, Sierra, it was the idea of this happened so many times. I said, I think that was something the judge was going to consider here.
And what he said very specifically is that I was sitting right here. I heard the testimony. And I think that is what is so vital when we were talking about the way that the judge was going to end up with all of this sentencing, is the fact that it wasn't today he decided it. It wasn't in the 3 months that he had to go through and read all of those letters. No, it was when he was sitting there in the courtroom, seeing Cassie and Jane and Mia and all of the testimony there, that this happened over and over again. It wasn't, to your point, to what Serena said earlier, this wasn't a one-time thing. This was a pattern of abuse that the prosecution put on and displayed, and then here we have a conviction. And so I do think that all of this is kind of running through Judge Arun Subramanian's mind as he's coming forth, putting down this sentence, because, I mean, it's really hard to ignore.
All right, Judge, this just came in. A significant sentence is required to deter. You say you're sorry and you won't do it again. After Miss Ventura's civil lawsuit was filed, after the video was public and investigation started, you had a brutal hotel night with Jane, punched her in the head. Serena, that is the key here. That is something we have talked about during the course of the day. It didn't deter him. There were significant episodes that came out after the investigation, after the apology. He was arrested with materials in his hotel room that would indicate a freak off. I think we're looking here at maybe 5 to 7. I don't know yet. What can happen any second, but I think we're looking at significant prison time here.
Yeah, I mean, I think the judge makes an incredible note that, you've had the chance to deter. You were not deterred. You were given an opportunity over and over again, specifically during the investigation, and you can't be stopped. And if you can't be stopped, I'm going to have to be the one to stop you.
What are folks saying?
Yep. And by the way, the judge has considered his history. He said about the fact that, he.
Ali, once they deliver the sentence, I need you to come up here for like 5 minutes if you can.
Became Sean Combs after his father died. That is especially impressive given the early and violent death of your father and the trauma that must have left. So he's appreciating all this, but at the same time, he's hitting all the factors and he's talking about the evidence that came out during the course of this trial. He just said, Jane says he told her, take this pill, go out there, bleep his bleep, bleep him. I don't care. The court is not convinced this would not happen again. The court has considered the programs. They are outweighed by the trial record in this case. Now I'm wondering here, Joe, are we talking double digits?
I think we're going a little higher. We'll see how high we go. But 5 to 7 at least, and maybe even a little bit more. That's what it's sounding like. And there's an argument that the record supports that. Diddy was extra arrogant, and the length of time, I think, is incredibly persuasive and moving for the judge. Obviously, this is not something that happened once or twice and he got his hand caught in the cookie jar. This was built into what Diddy did. This was his culture, and he was truly lawless, just to put it where it really is. And so, the judge has been very honest about, I don't think that this deters you. And, I tell you, that tracks with me. Maybe we're all wrong, but to go off of what we've had happen and had said and had done and the trial record, that's not unreasonable for the judge to say that.
I am wondering also, Serena, if this is grounds for an appeal where the court says, I'm not sentencing you on racketeering or sex. Okay, hold on. Here we go. Exploitation and violence against women must be met with real accountability to promote respect for the law. Okay, hold on one second. I'm getting the sentence right now. Okay, here we go. Oh boy.
I'm sweating.
Exploitation and violence against women must be met with real accountability to promote respect for the law. The court reaches a few conclusions. 135 months would be more than necessary. Now, I don't know if that means that that's the actual sentence right now, but 135 months is over 11 years in prison. So over 11 years in prison would be more than necessary. That's what the judge is saying here, Serena. I don't know if that's the official sentence as of yet. We're waiting to get confirmation about that. But what does that say?
Well, just to throw that number out there like that means that at least he was considering the 11 years that the prosecution put forth, and maybe even more than that. It sounds like he's kind of tempering it, like that is more than necessary, and it'll be less than the 11. But it also sounds like he at least considered it very seriously as an option.
Now I'm wondering, Sierra, are we talking 7 years? I mean, again, it's something we talked about earlier. Maybe the benefit of the family speaking and the benefit of the work that he's done was not to get to 11 years, but not to go lower than the 5 to 7 range. So that may have been the benefit, but I'm wondering if 7 years is what we might be looking at. Again, I'm waiting for official confirmation on the sentence here, Sierra.
I think that is possible here, that maybe he's saying, okay, yes, the prosecution, the government brought forward this number of 11 years. Yeah, that is more than necessary based on, oh, we actually have an update. Jesse, I'm going to throw it back to you.
Yep. A sentence over 11 years is not reasonable. So anybody that thought he would get 20 years, that's not happening. A sentence over 11 years is not reasonable. Even the probation department recommends a sentence less than half of that. But 14 months time served, that would not be sufficient. So he has rejected the defense's recommendation of 14 months. In other words, Diddy is not getting out of prison. He is not getting out of prison today. When he would, we're waiting. I'm not, it's not like I have these updates and I'm purposely delaying. I'm getting to them in real time as we are getting them. Sierra, so again, we're now looking at between 14 months and 11 years. But I guess, again, going back to this idea of, are we looking at 7?
I mean, all speculation as of right now, but I think the most important thing is what you just said there, Jesse. P. Diddy, Sean Combs, is not getting out of jail today. And the 14-month recommendation that the defense brought has just been thrown completely out the window. The judge says, no, that's not sufficient enough. And I think what he's saying could be taken in a couple of different ways. One, that the 11 years is sufficient. Yes, I mean, based on your conviction here, because again, remember, this is a conviction. 11 years makes sense. It checks out. I agree with the prosecution. But to what Serena said earlier, perhaps, oh, and we do have a new update. Jesse,
I think we have the official sentence right now for Sean Diddy Combs. After being convicted of 2 counts of transportation to engage in prostitution, the judge has just said, here the data shows a wide variety of sentences. Weighing all of the relevant factors, the court determines that the sentence is 50 months of incarceration. So 50 months of incarceration is a little over 4 years. Okay. It's 4.16 years in prison. Now, that is a bit lower than what the range was of 5 to 7 years, Sierra. Let's start there. If I'm reading this correct, and we're talking 50 months, and I'm waiting for, we have another update coming in. I'm just waiting to see what it is. But right now, it appears that Sean Combs has officially been sentenced to 50 months of incarceration. So 4 years in prison. You talk about time served.
What's up, Callie?
Right, about a year. Are we talking now then 3 years, right, Sierra?
Okay, so a little over 4. I was thinking he was going to get 5. I did not see him getting more than 5.
Yeah, so about 3 more years based on the 1 year that he has already served. And I guess, I mean, it is a win for P. Diddy, and that the government asked for 11. You know, the recommendation was 5 to 7, which a lot of us guessed would happen. I mean, yes, he wanted to be out today. That was his goal. The defense, of course, wanting the 14 months. But 3 years compared to the 11 that the judge says, yeah, that's warranted. I mean, there's a huge difference in the range there, more than a decade versus less than half of a decade. We've got another update, Jesse, back to you.
Yep. Serena, Sean Combs was sentenced to 50 months of incarceration by Judge Subramanian, so a little over 4 years. That minus the 14 months already served. Is that the appropriate sentence, Serena?
Well, I'm sure Diddy is not thrilled to not walk out today, but he should be pretty happy with his defense team, because I think the judge giving less than half of the prosecutor's recommendation and also less than what the pre-sentence report had said is a win for him. I do believe that 4 years is a win in this particular case.
Joe, what did it? Was it his letter? Was it the letters of family? Was it the children speaking? Was it the work that he's doing behind bars? Was it the nature of these charges? You know, as much as we say that the judge was not convinced to throw out the charges, right? The defense put forward that motion saying transportation to engage in prostitution should be thrown out. This is not prostitution. It's protected by the First Amendment. The judge didn't buy it. But the argument, hey, he wasn't convicted of racketeering. He wasn't convicted of sex trafficking, just the prostitution charges.
What are folks saying?
Create a disparity based on other defendants who are sentenced.
All
Maybe
right.
4 years is appropriate and won't be overturned on appeal.
Yeah, I mean, I think he had to position this a certain
Callie said 4 is not enough.
way. And there's a couple things to figure in. First of all, we got to go back to the fact that the defense did an enormous job in getting him off of the most serious charges, right? So we're talking about something that's going to be smaller and it's going to be less time anyway. Next, there's a probation department recommendation, right? Which put things at a certain place. And it sounded like, even though the judge talked about how 11 years wouldn't have necessarily been unreasonable, and he said 14 months would have been entirely unreasonable if I am hearing it correctly, he still is in line in that he doesn't want to do something that'll necessarily be appealable, and he wants to arrive somewhere not too far afield from the recommendations themselves. And so, again, here's Diddy in a situation where he did a lot better than he might have. And, you know, that 3 years is going to go by in no time. And the day that he was found guilty of most of everything, it ensured that he would have a date that he would get home at some point anyway. So he will get home. He's better off than he may have been, than a lot of people would have been, even though he's not coming home today.
Somebody
Serena,
said PR Kelly.
Does he serve the full 3 years, or does he serve 85%? In other words, would he serve 2.5 years?
So there is opportunity for him to get out earlier on good behavior. And so the calculation is not exact. And time will tell whether he will be getting out with some time off from the full 3. I know it's a 4-year sentence. Obviously, the 14 months counts. You already deduct that. I mean, that's definitely coming off because he does have credit for the time served. So already it's less than the sentence that he's getting, the 4 years. But yeah, he could very easily be walking out sooner rather than later. So the children will have their father home sooner than they expected. And as Joe mentioned before, he can be on his comeback tour, in no time.
We had a poll up. What do you think Diddy's sentence will be? So 31% said less than 5 years. They were correct. It's interesting.
I
as
thought
we're
it was
processing
5.
the sentence of 4 years, time served 3, maybe 85%, so 2.5, 3 years.
Oh yeah, he'll be out. He'll be out before we know it. He'll be out before we know it.
To serve behind bars. I wonder if he's actually going to now have to serve it at the MDC because it's it's a lesser sentence than we were anticipating. I will say the court imposes a fine of $500,000, including to defray the costs of imprisonment. There is no restitution, but there is forfeiture.
Somebody said no justice for abused women. That's not what he was convicted
for. As reflected in the order. There is a $5,000 fine under the statute and a special assessment of $200. Sierra, I go to you. This is interesting because I also wonder what the reaction is going to be outside that court.
Right. I want to see that.
What we're going to hear from the attorneys, what we're going to hear from supporters of Sean
people
Combs,
are celebrating.
Hearing from potential victims or people who are there opposed to Sean Combs. Are you seeing anything outside since the sentence has been read?
You know what's interesting, Jesse? After the verdict came down, you could feel it in the air. It was, intense. You could actually feel the emotion. Now that the sentence has been handed down, it seems to me like no one around us actually knows that it was handed down. I mean, it did
Wow.
just happen. We're probably one of the first ones to report it at all, but there's been no commotion. There's been no cheering. There's been no free Diddy, in support of Diddy. There's been no opposition to Diddy. That has been pretty interesting to me overall. I mean, as far as what we're going to hear from the attorneys, I said this about the verdict, and I'm going to say it about this too. I think it's a win for P. Diddy. I mean, the fact that he was up against this RICO charge, the racketeering conspiracy, had he been convicted of that, he could have faced essentially the rest of his life behind bars. Now he had pretty much the lowest charge that he was convicted of, this transportation to engage in prostitution. And now, based on what Serena is saying with the 4 years, and maybe he could serve less based on, good behavior, etc. I'm going to say that's a huge win for Diddy, especially when his life was in the balance. And I wonder if that's what we're going to hear. I wonder if prosecutors are going to say, we asked for the 11 years. The judge says it was warranted, and yet we didn't get the 11 years. And I wonder if the defense is going to say, it's still too much. It's far too long. Get him out with his children. We're going to appeal. I mean, so there's still a lot ahead.
Well, first of all, the judge said this is, quote, hard time, but also indicated that he's going to have a life after prison. He'll be, 59, 60 years old, potentially, probably 59 years old. The judge says, I want to speak to the strong women who came forward. Miss Ventura and Jane, you've been through trauma we can't imagine. Miss Ventura said it was forced sex and degradation. I want to say, we heard you. You weren't just speaking to the jurors, but to other victims. You stood up to power. It's not easy. Violence behind closed doors doesn't have to stay secret forever. I know you still bear trauma, but you've taught us you don't have to stay a victim. Now, Serena, that is important. That's an important statement from the judge here, because there are those who will look at this and say, this is not enough time, that this doesn't recognize what the victims went through in a case like this, particularly Cassie, when we talk about the video that was shown. It's felt very deliberate on the part of the judge. But to be clear, the prosecution doesn't have grounds to appeal this. Oh, the judge said 11 years, gave 4. They can't fight this, right?
Correct. They can't. And I agree with you that it does seem like the judge was issuing a little bit of an apology to the women, to Cassie, to the victims for this sentence. Which is an interesting point. I mean, the judge obviously knows that unlike most cases, this will be publicized one way or another. People will have very strong opinions about the fact that a 4-year sentence really calculates to basically like 2.5 more years in prison for Diddy, which does feel probably to the victims a little bit like a slap on the wrist. So I do think that that statement was necessary from the judge. I don't know that it's going to fix the feelings that Cassie and others may be feeling right now.
Joe, we have a question from Jane Elaine.
All right, some folks are saying justice is not served.
The judge specifically mentioned that he
Sounded like they wanted Diddy to be hung or something.
exploited women, but that wasn't the charge. So does he have grounds to appeal and get the sentence overturned?
No, I don't think that he will. Again, there's a lot of crossover in terms of some of the things that occurred. There's an argument. This is a form of exploitation, transferring somebody across state lines, transporting them for purposes of prostitution. So I don't think that there will be grounds just because of the words that he used in this context. And again, there's a lot of gray area here in terms of the crossover between the crimes. There are some larger statements to be made. Not every statement that he made is within the confines of the trial of what he was tried and convicted of. So in other words, if he was to say, for instance, Diddy, you've done some bad things. Well, yeah, he has done some bad things. And he's talking generally about the fact that he's done some things that are reprehensible, etc. So not every word he's going to use. I think there's an argument that he did exploit women. I think that it is a form of exploitation to transport someone across state lines, etc. So there's not going to be this technical violation for using that word as an example.
You think about what he's about to go through here, Serena. If you, by all accounts, the way that he described it in his letter, today in general, it was hell. I mean, he went through a year of hell in that MDC. No, no sympathy there, but you think about what he's going to go through now, maybe potentially another 3 years of that, whether it's there or another facility. What is his life going to look like now?
Well, MDC is really a hellhole, like you mentioned. But the truth of the matter is, everybody who's incarcerated there goes through that, not just Sean Diddy Combs.
Right.
You know, he does have this platform to kind of educate
And they're saying the judge failed them. They wanted more.
people now about the prison conditions and
Folks
jail
are happy out
conditions, and
here.
that's great. But it's not like he's special. It's not like he's unique. Everybody who gets accused of a crime and detained while facing those charges has to go through that. His life is going to be not so great. I mean, if he goes upstate, it'll probably be better than it has been at MDC, to be honest with you. He'll probably have better treatment upstate than he's had at MDC. That being said, you know, obviously he's going to be isolated. He's not going to have his freedom. He's not going to have this publicity, you know, where he goes to court and everybody talks about him. So hopefully he'll have some time to reflect on all of this. Maybe he'll do some good back there. He'll help some fellow inmates, entertain them or whatever else it is. And then when he comes out, hopefully he'll be changed. But it does seem like quite a short period of time for him to be able to change behind the bars back there.
Judge Arun Subramanian just said this to Sean Combs, that he's likely in a dark place right now, but, quote, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. These letters, all those letters that I saw, show that you have a universe of people who love you. Let them lift you up now, just like you've lifted them up for so many years. Sierra, this is from a human point of view. I have to tell you, from a legal point of view, I'll tell you, Judge Arun Subramanian, throughout the course of this trial, I was very impressed with his rulings. I was very impressed with his demeanor, how he handled such a high-profile case with difficult subject matter. And to take the time to address both Sean Combs and to address the victims in this case in a very particular way, it says a lot about this judge. And I have to just tell you, from a personal point of view, I was very impressed with the way that he handled it. What's your take on this?
It's interesting that you bring that up, Jesse, because today, being back here in the Southern District of New York, I'm kind of going back in my mind and reviewing the case as a whole. I mean, I know I covered it every day. You did, Elizabeth did. So we all were kind of immersed in all of this. And I was thinking about how Judge Arun Subramanian really had the weight of the world on his shoulders today when it comes to the sentencing in terms of how much is at stake. And I was thinking back to all the rulings that he'd previously made, and I thought that he was very diplomatic. I mean, I didn't personally see any sort of wild favoritism for one side or another. I thought that it was interesting today that he ruled that the victims were victims, that he was going to take into consideration some of the testimony in regards to, you know, the RICO charge, the racketeering conspiracy, in regards to this conviction on the transportation to engage in prostitution. But I do think he did a very good job of being fair, addressing Diddy, saying this isn't.
All right, that's it. I need to go in a little bit. What's up, Benji? Oh my goodness. I'm sorry I've been MIA, but I did I replied to your email. I think it was last week. I've just been incredibly busy. I've been incredibly busy. I barely get any rest. I was just exhausted. But I did jump up here in order to see what's happening with Diddy live and react to that. I was of the opinion that the judge was going to split the baby and sentence him to 5 years. But based on the verdict, I suppose, or it sounds like, not the verdict, the sentence, it sounds like the judge was actually really swayed by the defense and their mitigation. So kudos to the defense attorneys. They put on one hell of a show, right? There's been a mess with, I mean, Maureen Comey, she was not fired due to Diddy, though. She was fired due to her father and Donald Trump. So I don't know that her being on the case would have made a difference as far as sentencing is concerned. But I don't really care. I hate to be this person, but I don't really care about the sentence. He was convicted and the work is done. I quickly want to go up here and just see what the folks on Reddit are saying. One moment.
The end of the line for you. You said that you had remorse. You said that there was reform.
It's like a Diddy subreddit. So somewhere here.
can do that while also acknowledging the huge amount of trauma that these victims have had to endure on a public stage, no less. This is, one of the most high profile cases we've ever covered here on Law and Crime. And I think he did so very eloquently.
I need to go feed.
So the judge, by the way,
Alexa, stop.
later on, we're going to have Elizabeth Milner out, and we're going to do a special sidebar episode with her because I want to know what it was like in that courtroom when this sentence.
All right. Well, I guess I'm gonna have to come back. I don't know that Benji's like, it's good to see you doing well in Oslo Street. I know I had no plans of being up here, but I think it makes sense for me to come back tonight. Okay, that was not the plan because Fridays are for my laundry. All right, but let's come back up tonight because I am on the Diddy subreddit. No, maybe I'm on the wrong one. Yeah, I was trying to find, there's a Diddy. Oh, here we go. Okay. Now the reactions are pouring in about the sentence. So let me come back tonight. I'll be back tonight. Let's do 9 p.m. I want to say 8:30, but I don't know. I have to feed myself and do my laundry. So let's do that. I'll be back 9 p.m. Eastern time, and then we take a closer look at the sentence that was handed down. All right. Well, Benji, Callie, and Allie, it's good to see that you guys still hang out with me, even though I did disappear, but it was for good reason. All right, folks. If you're working, if you have stuff to do that. You can watch the replay. But if you are available, I'll be live tonight, 5 p.m. Eastern time. Okay. All right. Talk to you later.